Good morning. It is April 2nd, 2:13 p.m., and we're going to call to order the board meeting for the Tennessee Funeral Board, Funeral Directors and Embalmers. As we begin the meeting, we want to remind everybody that there'll be a sign-in sheet on the table by the door, and before the meeting is over or at the conclusion, everyone please make sure that you sign it. And please indicate by your name as you sign in. Any public comments will be accepted near the end of the board meeting. Ms. Bohannon, would you call the roll?
Don Hayes. Here. Chris Lee. Here. Randy Nash. Here. Wendell Naylor. Here. Scotty Porsche. Here. Pam Stevens. Here. Tim Willer. Here. Mr. President, all board members are here and accounted for.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. First thing is I'll accept a motion and a second to adopt today's agenda that everyone has received.
I make the motion we accept the agenda as proposed.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Wheeler, a second by Mr. Nash. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Motion carried. Second things, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the meeting minutes from February 11th, 2025. You received those prior to the meeting. Any discussion? If not, I'll accept a motion for adoption.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Nash, a second by Mr. Wheeler to adopt the February 11th minutes. All in favor respond by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Mr. Bryant, the legal report, please, sir.
Good afternoon, board members. The first complaint is complaint number 2024-066131. This case was administratively opened following a routine inspection conducted on December 12, 2024. During the course of this routine inspection, the inspector observed the following. Respondent's manager allowed their funeral directors and embalmers license to expire on September 30th, 2024, and was not reinstated until November 20th, 2024. The inspector did not find evidence to suggest that the manager had acted in the capacity of a Tennessee licensed funeral director or embalmer, but respondent establishment was without a licensed manager from October 1st, 2024 until renewal on November 20th, 2024. Manager of respondent establishment replied, stating that the unlicensed period was due to their failure to complete the continuing education requirements. Manager explained that they had completed more than enough hours and had been informed by the NFDA that the courses taken from them would satisfy the requirements. The manager stated they had another licensed funeral director on staff, but stated that they were unaware they needed to change the manager status of the establishment during the unlicensed period. Based on the above, we'd recommend a $500 civil penalty, authorized via consent order, and a formal hearing if necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Board members, any discussion or motion?
Motion to approve.
I just have one question, Mr. Bryant. So it expired on September 30th, and they didn't renew it until November 20th, so 40 days. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How many services did they perform? Do we know?
That information was not obtained during the inspection. The investigator did not put that information in there. I guess on this one specifically, the information we have before us is that no evidence that this unlicensed individual conducted unlicensed activity, but he was the manager of this establishment without an active funeral director's license.
Okay. I'll second Mr. Nash's motion.
Excuse me. Have a motion by Mr. Nash, a second by Mr. Wheeler to accept the recommendation of council, $500 civil penalty. All in favor respond by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Number two.
Next complaint is complaint number 2024-067381. This case was administratively opened following a routine inspection conducted on November 25th, 2024. During the course of this routine inspection, the inspector observed the following. An employee of respondent establishment was not properly registered with the department as a pre-need sales agent. The employee had written 7 pre-need contracts during the unlicensed period. Respondent replied stating that this was first discovered and corrected the day the inspector was on site. Respondent stated this was an oversight as the employee had received her insurance license earlier in the year, and the employee believed that the appropriate registrations had been obtained by the corporate office. Respondent stated that policies are now in place to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And just so the board is aware, a companion case was opened against the employee in burial services. In that response, the employee explained that after passing the required exam in July of 2024, she exchanged emails with the corporate office who indicated that all licensing and registration requirements had been taken care of. It appears from the email communications that corporate office was successfully able to obtain the insurance provider's registration, but had not obtained the pre-need sales agent registration, leading to the employee and respondent's belief that all registration requirements had been addressed. Based on the above, we'd recommend a $500 civil penalty, authorized via consent order and formal hearing if necessary.
Any discussion?
Mr. Bryant, just to clarify, this individual is not a licensed funeral director.
That is correct. That's my understanding.
I make a motion to accept.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Nash, second by Mr. Wheeler to accept recommendation of $500 civil penalty. All in favor respond by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. And number 3, Mr. Bryant, on the summary, should that not be 2025 before you get started?
That is correct. That should be November 5th, 2024.
Thank you,
That
sir.
is my mistake.
That's all right. Go ahead.
And two, just so the board is aware, this is a sister establishment to the preceding one, so the facts will look very similar. This case was administratively opened. First, the complaint number is 2024-067-361. This case was administratively opened following a routine inspection conducted on November 5th, 2024. During the course of this routine inspection, the inspector observed the following. An employee of respondent establishment was not properly registered with the department as a pre-need sales agent. The employee had written 9 pre-need contracts during the unlicensed period. And again, respondent reiterated the reply from the previous one, stating that it was first discovered and corrected the day the inspector was on site, and that this was an oversight as the employee had received the insurance license earlier in the year and erroneously believed that all appropriate registrations had been obtained. Based on the above, we'd recommend a $500 civil penalty, authorized via consent order and formal hearing if necessary.
Any discussion on case number 3? If no discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Have a motion by Ms. Stevens. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. And a second by Mr. Porch to accept council's recommendation of $500 civil penalty. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Number 4, Mr. Bryant.
Next complaint is complaint number 2024-068-091. Complainant alleged that respondent's website misadvertised the cost of a cremation. Specifically, complainant stated that respondent's website indicated that a cremation cost, quote, $795, but that upon clicking on the offer, the price was only available if the decedent weighed less than 150 pounds. Complainant also alleged that respondent included no pricing details on their website. Respondent replied through counsel refuting complainant's claim that the website offered, quote, no details as to the prices offered for services. Respondent explained that at the time of complainant's complaint, the location's basic cremation container could not support a decedent heavier than 150 pounds, and as a result, the respondent would have to use a different basic container for decedents heavier than 150 pounds. However, respondent stated they have now contracted to purchase a different basic container that will support decedents who weigh up to 300 pounds. Furthermore, regarding online pricing, respondent stated that the website advertises cremation, quote, starting at $795 and has a link to price out preferred arrangements online. Respondent stated in order to address the complainant's concerns, they will rework the website to make the pricing information even more clear. As a side note, though it may or may not have been complainant's intent, the complaint is essentially an anonymous complaint, as the information provided in the complainant window is the information of respondent's general manager. Legal has no way to contact complainant to obtain any additional information, as they provided no contact information of their own. Complainant attached a single screenshot of the respondent's website, which states, quote, cremation services and location for starting at $795, end quote. At the time of the complaint, based upon the screenshot provided, the $795 figure did not contain itemized pricing. In examining the website now, the $795 figure does contain itemized pricing. Based on the above, historically, under the board's application of 62-5-106, failure to add itemized pricing to a specific website constitutes a violation. However, based on the anonymous nature of the complaint and that the respondent has amended the violation of their website, we would recommend a letter of warning.
Motion to approve council's recommendation.
Have a motion by Mr. Haynes to accept council's recommendation, letter of warning. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Naylor. And I agree, first of all, any anonymous complaint, I don't have time to deal with it. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Number 5.
Next complaint is complaint number 2024-068561. Complainant stated that her husband passed away on November 17, 2024, and that the decedent's brother handled the funeral without her knowledge. Specifically, complainant stated that once finding out that a funeral would take place on November 30th, 2024, complainant went to the funeral home on November 25th, 2024 to discuss the funeral arrangements. Complainant stated she asked that the funeral be moved to December 2nd since she would not be in town on November 30th, 2024. Complainant alleged they later received a call from respondent indicating that they would still have the funeral on November 30th, 2024 since the service had already been paid for by the decedent's brother. Respondent replied confirming that complainant had come into the respondent establishment on November 25th, 2024 and indicated that she was next of kin. Respondent stated that during this conversation, complainant was informed that she could have the service on whatever day she wanted, but that per the brother of the decedent, she would be the one responsible for all financial obligations. Respondent stated that complainant replied, quote, "Go ahead with the arrangements," end quote, and that the brother paid for the service of the decedent and that the respondent proceeded with the complainant's permission. Legal called complainant and spoke with her on March 20th, 2025. Complainant stated in short that she did not learn until around November 25th, 2024 that her husband was at respondent establishment and that the arrangements had already been made by the decedent's brother. After discussing the matter with the respondent, complainant was okay with the arrangements that had been selected and had no true objection to those decisions other than the date of the service, which had been scheduled for November 30th, 2024, a Saturday. Complainant stated she already had plans to visit her daughter in Texas for Thanksgiving and would not be available and asked that, as the next of kin, the service be moved to the following Monday, December 2nd, 2024. Respondent agreed to do this, stating it would not be a problem. Complainant stated she received several harassing phone calls from family members about her decision to move the service to December 2nd, 2024, and received these calls throughout the week of Thanksgiving. Finally, on November 29th, 2024, while still in Texas, complainant received a phone call from respondent explaining that the brother of the decedent had stated that if the complainant wished to move the service to December 2nd, 2024, he would no longer fund the funeral. Complainant stated that since she was in Texas, unable to get the funds to respond at that time, and after receiving the several harassing communications from family members, complainant acquiesced to allowing the service to continue on the following day, November 30th, 2024, rather than her preferred date of December 2nd, 2024. Complainant also stated that once she acquiesced to the November 30th date, respondent mentioned the possibility of a live stream for the service, and that the complainant agreed she would be interested in receiving that link. Complainant stated respondent informed them that they would call the next morning and provide the information. However, according to complainant, respondent never called regarding that live stream. Based on the above, while complainant arguably gave permission to proceed on November 30th, 2024, respondent provided no information or explanation as to how the brother of the decedent was selected as the next of kin upon the initial arrangement conference. Per conversation with the complainant, the brother was well aware of complainant and her daughter, both of which would have had priority in next of kin determination. Respondent provided no information to show that they inquired as to the existence of the other next of kin determinants. And likewise, based on the limited information available, it appears respondents did not provide the information for the live stream that complainant had requested. Based on the above, we would recommend a $250 civil penalty, authorized via consent order, and a formal hearing if necessary.
Any discussion from board members?
I would just like to say this, that, you know, for the next of kin to be totally overlooked and ignored, and then the respondent, based on the limited information, they didn't even tell why they didn't get in touch with the wife, who was the legal next of kin, and the daughter the next, and then didn't even answer for the live stream. So I would make the recommendation that civil penalty be moved to $500, and maybe that'll get their attention on get your next of kin correct next time you've got a family in the office.
One thing that caught my eye that the decedent passed away on November 17th, and the wife did not even learn, I guess, where he was or anything for 8 days later. That's just a kind of curiosity on, did she even know he died? I mean,
my issue with this is that there's obviously some sort of a familial situation we're not aware of, and we don't have details on. And the familial situation, while it does involve the funeral home, it also doesn't in a way. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. So there's obviously something going on more than we're being made aware of. I do agree that the funeral home should have established, order of kinship. They should know those things. But I don't know that. I just have a hard time going as far as a fine in this situation, because we have a lot of, it's a lot of he said, she said in this whole complaint. And she even, if this is her husband, you're seeing your daughter, but if this is your husband and you're wanting to be there, you're going to make arrangements to be at your husband's funeral. I'm sorry. There's obviously more to this situation. And I feel like that, it's not really our job as a board to regulate a familial situation. I don't know if there's more information that needs to be established in this. I have a hard time voting for a penalty without, having more explanation from the respondent as far as how this had come about. How did you just start doing these arrangements and not determining who the person's next of kin was? And, if this person passed away in a facility, or where they were at, how did they get released from that facility or something without the next of kin being made aware or established?
I guess, Mr. Nash, and of course I have 40-plus years of funeral service. I've had several here lately that the next kin is a spouse, and they've been separated legally for 30 years or more. They don't live in the same state, but yet at the same time, there was the due diligence, and the family was very upfront with me that there was a wife. The funeral home did not seem to be surprised when the wife got in touch with them. They were glad to change, but then I don't know the circumstance. I guess I sort of fault the funeral establishment a little bit for just their lack of not providing more information. And maybe I feel that they just didn't take this as seriously as they should, but that's my only thing, and that's why I went after the civil penalty. That might get their attention a little bit.
Does the civil penalty, does that fall under unprofessional conduct?
Specifically, it could. Unprofessional conduct generally is intentionally broad because, as funeral directors, you all know what unprofessional conduct in the industry looks like and what it doesn't look like. Likewise, if this one ultimately does go for a consent order that I would send out, I would certainly cite the right of disposition statute that lists that pecking order. That I know, as we've talked about before in this board, I don't think the law ever anticipates that an establishment has to, be a private detective and figure out who is next of kin, but there does needs to be some level of inquiry. And when these complaints come up, that's one thing I always look for. Did they explain, hey, we did our homework and then they told us that's all that was out there and we went with it and we were misled? That's one thing, as opposed to here in the response, it was kind of a lack of, that they never explained why they landed on the brother of the decedent as the next of kin. That was a long-winded explanation.
No,
Sorry.
that's great. Mr. Wheeler, did you make a motion?
I did make a motion that we accept council's recommendation other than to move the civil penalty from $250 to $500.
I'd like to second that, and also a letter of instruction. You okay if I add that?
Perfectly fine this afternoon.
we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Wheeler and a second by Ms. Stevens to increase the civil penalty to $500 and add a letter of instruction to the establishment. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Have 2 noes. Motion carries. Number 6, Mr. Bryant.
Next complaint is complaint number 2024-068-721. I do apologize. This is my novel for the legal report. Complainant's brother of the decedent stated that their brother passed away on November 1st, 2024, and that they received a call from the decedent's girlfriend stating that respondent had picked up the decedent and taken him to their funeral home. Complainant stated that respondent, a friend of the decedent, knew that the decedent had siblings who would have taken priority in the right of disposition. Complainant alleged that respondent never contacted him and that ultimately he called respondent at 1 a.m. on November 2nd, 2024, and complainant claimed that respondent stated he would be cremating the decedent over the weekend, November 2nd, 2024 being a Saturday. Complainant stated he asked respondent not to do so as both he and the surviving sister wished to see the decedent's body first. Complainant alleged that respondent was following the directions of the decedent's girlfriend. Complainant further alleged he received a call later that evening from respondent stating he had just left the girlfriend's home and that they would be meeting in the morning to finalize the funeral arrangements for the decedent. Complainant stated he offered to travel to the funeral establishment in order to make the funeral arrangements, but purported that respondent said that wouldn't be necessary because the girlfriend was paying for the services and that she could make the decisions and that the only thing he needed was complainant's signature on the cremation form. Complainant further alleged that respondent told him there would be a service at a local church and that he would be presiding over the service. Complainant responded that their family would be unable to make the trip in time for the service and that they would need to have a service where they are from, and that respondent stated there would be an additional charge for the second funeral and that he would have to pay for the second service. Respondent replied stating that many of the allegations are not correct regarding his involvement with the decedent. Respondent stated on November 1st, 2024, he received a call from the medical investigator regarding the decedent and that a removal needed to be made to take him into their care. Respondent stated that the girlfriend directed the medical examiner to call him as the decedent and respondent had been close friends for many years. Respondent stated he spoke to complainant soon after, who said he needed a few days to process and that he preferred that they speak again on Monday. Respondent stated this call was not as late as 1 a.m. on November 2nd, 2024, but that it did occur on Friday night. Respondent also provided that complainant was calling from the Eastern Time Zone and that they were in the Central Time Zone. Respondent stated in their brief conversation, he said that he wanted to have a traditional funeral home in East Tennessee, and that respondent only stated that he could assist in the preparation of the decedent. Respondent stated, quote, I later went to the funeral home and embalmed him, end quote, and denied that at any time there was any discussion to cremate the decedent over the weekend. Respondent said that even if the family had wanted to do so and signed the necessary authorization, he would have needed to obtain a signed cremation permit from the medical examiner, process it through the health department, which could not have happened that quickly over the same weekend. Respondent stated that the girlfriend had been speaking to both complainant and the sister about arrangements for the decedent and were specifically trying to figure out details to either have a funeral at respondent's establishment or locally or to be transported back to East Tennessee. Respondent stated they offered their church if they decided to have a local service if needed. Respondent further provided that the girlfriend expressed to complainant she would pay for services if they could come to an agreement to have the services locally. Respondent stated that the conversations between the girlfriend, complainant, and sister continued for a few days as the decedent remained in their care. Respondent stated that complainant stopped communicating with him by the first of the week, but that he spoke with the sister several times. Once it was decided they would not have a local service and that they would arrange from transport to a separate funeral home. Respondent stated the sister also asked that respondent obtain the decedent's veterans information, to which respondent stated they did as soon as possible. Respondent stated they did not charge for the transport to the new funeral home and that it was a smooth transition to the new establishment, and concluded that they spoke with the sister a couple of times prior to the service as she had invited the respondent to attend, and that the sister was thankful and appreciative for everything that they had done to assist. So, legal spoke to respondent, who indicated that in the initial conversation with complainant, he had received verbal approval to embalm the decedent. Respondent stated the embalming was done the same night, November 1, 2024, Friday night, to ensure the decedent was well cared for and preserved as quickly as possible. Respondent stated only after embalming occurred did complainant indicate he no longer wished for the decedent to be embalmed as he wanted an autopsy conducted. Respondent likewise provided to legal the authorization to embalm document, indicating permission to embalm the decedent had been verbally given by complainant, the brother of the decedent, via a conversation on November 1, 2024. In the purported text messages that complainant provided, one is dated Saturday, November 2nd, 2024 at 8 a.m., following the embalmment stating, quote, "I think I want to go ahead and have an autopsy done just for peace of mind." Likewise, complainant provided another purported text message from Monday, November 4th, 2024 at 10:53 a.m. as follows. Complainant stating, quote, "Hey, respondent, has the decedent been embalmed yet?" End quote. Respondent, "Girlfriend came to the funeral home. I would like to discuss your wishes and the arrangements. Thanks. He has been prepared." Complainant, "I told you that I did not want him embalmed," which I think was supposed to be embalmed, "until after we had toxicology report or done autopsy." Respondent, "He was prepared prior to your text yesterday morning. We can discuss when we call, but as of Friday night when we spoke regarding services, you shared what you wanted. Again, we can discuss when you call. Thank you." Complainant then wrote a note to the side of the text stating that respondent was told twice on Saturday not to embalm. However, per respondent's timeline, the decedent was embalmed Friday night following the discussion with complainant. Legal spoke to an individual with direct information that wished to remain anonymous. They stated that their interactions with respondent, that they were very cordial and appeared to have the family's best interests at heart. The anonymous individual did not have direct knowledge or information as to that first conversation between complainant and respondent, but indicated that their interactions with respondent were positive and that they were appreciative of the services respondent provided. Based on the above, the entire crux of this conversation appears to rest on the first conversation with complainant and respondent that occurred either late November 1, 2024 or very early November 2, 2024. In this conversation, respondent indicates complainant gave verbal authorization to embalm. Complainant does not state whether this is true or not in their complaint, but their texts indicate that approval was reconsidered on November 2nd, 2024 at 8 a.m., and again in subsequent conversations because the complainant wanted an autopsy of the decedent conducted. However, per information provided by respondent, the decedent had already been embalmed following that initial conversation from the previous night or earlier, very early in the morning that same day. Ultimately, there does not appear to be other instances of the girlfriend controlling the right of disposition, as text messages submitted by complainant themselves show and indicate that respondent is contacting complainant regarding, quote, complainant's wishes and the arrangements, end quote. There was no statement of funeral goods and services because respondent never entered into a contract with girlfriend and upon transfer to the other funeral home, never entered into a contract with complainant or the decedent's family. In short, from information provided, respondent removed the decedent from the medical examiner, embalmed following permission provided by complainant, which was later revoked after embalming had already taken place, and provided transfer to the new funeral establishment, all of which occurred at no cost. Based on the above, we'd recommend closure.
The anonymous person wasn't the girlfriend, I hope.
It was not.
I keep looking back at the front that says respondent stated the girlfriend directed the medical examiner to call him, but he knew she wasn't the, I don't know, there's a lot in here, y'all. Ms. Troy, in all of this, what was the initial complaint? The embalming?
It seemed to be somewhat twofold. They did seem to be frustrated about the embalming, but seemed primarily frustrated that the girlfriend appeared to be controlling the right of disposition. I think in that alone, by the fact that ultimately the way this ended was with the complainant authorizing a transfer of the decedent to a separate funeral home shows that the girlfriend evidently was not all that in control of the arrangements. So I think the complaint started much larger with the entire right of disposition an issue, but based on the information I found through conversations with the parties, it appears to me that the outstanding issue is that conversation about the embalming. So it did start much larger, but I was unable to find at any point where there was any evidence the girlfriend had actually made any arrangements that the respondent ever carried out and followed.
So, there's a lot in here. Do we know what ultimately they did, once the body was, the decedent was transferred to the second funeral home, do we know what they did then?
My understanding from conversations with some of the parties is that ultimately they had a service out there. That I think there was a later decision about, I don't want to misstate it, but from my recollection is that the girlfriend was feeling left out at that point, and that they ultimately acquiesced to, okay, after we have our service back home, you can cremate the decedent. And from that point, respondent stated to me, I was friends with the decedent because of all this. I wanted no part of any of that. I once it got to that part, once the decedent was transferred from their care, the respondent exits the narrative entirely.
So ultimately, okay. I make a motion to approve the recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Nash, second by Mr. Wheeler, to accept recommendation by council of closure. All in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Next,
Number 7, I'm sorry.
sorry, Mr. Lee. Next complaint is complaint number 02025004991. An anonymous complainant alleged that respondent has unlicensed activity was occurring, and that the licensed funeral director, quote, doesn't stay in town and micromanages everything by phone, end quote. Anonymous complainant also alleged as to matters involving the owner and general manager's personal lives. Anonymous complainant further alleged that many employees are all unlicensed and have made funeral arrangements with families, and claimed this had occurred for over 500 cases in 2024 and several in 2025. Complainant provided no information to corroborate any of these allegations. Respondent replied stating that they employ several licensed funeral directors, including many mentioned as staff in the complaint, in addition to several others. Respondents say they do have several unlicensed employees on staff that assist the families with matters such as flowers, recording of information, music, live streaming, etc. The respondent indicated it is their belief that the complaint stems from a disgruntled employee. Respondent's attorney also replied on respondent's behalf, stating the complaint offers no contact information as to the anonymous complaint and provides no information that can substantiate the allegations. Based on the above, complainant fails to provide any evidence that applicable funeral laws or rules have been violated on behalf of respondent, and we would recommend closure.
Move for approval.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. President.
Just real quick, Mr. Bryant. In 2018, they were up under the history for the very same thing. Is that correct? Their previous history?
It would appear so, that they had some violation related to an embalming occurring by a non-licensed embalmer.
Okay, so they did get a letter of warning on that one.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Have a motion on the floor by Ms. Stevens, second by Mr. Nash for recommendation of closure on anonymous complaint. All in favor respond by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 8.
Complaint number 2025005021. This case was administratively opened following a routine inspection conducted on January 28th, 2025. During the course of this routine inspection, the inspector observed the following. The manager of respondent establishment allowed their funeral director's license to expire on November 30th, 2024, and was not reinstated until January 8th, 2025. There was no evidence that the manager had acted in the capacity of licensed funeral director during the unlicensed period. However, respondent establishment was without a licensed funeral director operating as manager from December 1, 2024 through January 7th, 2025. The manager replied stating that they had taken online CE courses through an online provider that they had used previously. The manager stated they later discovered that they were not approved for the 5 in-person hours. The manager stated as soon as they realized the error, they enrolled in and completed the necessary coursework. However, respondent stated that due to the options available, it took several weeks to get the necessary hours. The manager admitted that it was their fault for failing to do better research on what courses were approved for in-person CE credits. Based on the above, we'd recommend a $500 civil penalty authorized via consent order and a formal hearing if necessary.
Discussion.
I wonder if this board will ever stop hearing these kinds of complaints.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Nash, second by Mr. Wheeler to accept $500 civil penalty. Recommended by council. All in favor respond by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 9.
Next complaint is complaint number 2024-060051. Complainant stated that respondent had not provided the death certificate within a reasonable time. Specifically, complainant stated that following the death of the decedent on August 13, 2024, at the time of the complaint filed with the Consumer Protection Division, October 19, 2024, she had still not received the death certificate. Respondent did not respond to the complaint, so based on the above, we'd recommend a $2,000 civil penalty authorized via consent order and a formal hearing if necessary.
Discussion on this one.
Yes, I
Yeah.
would like to, Mr. Bryant, we go back and look at past history. Wow. Lots of penalties.
Not in all collections.
And yeah. And how did you come up to the $2,000 civil penalty, please? Because I see where they've had other.
And it looks like those other civil penalties were sent to a collection agency.
And
Is that to collect our fees?
And they also failed to respond.
Yes. So can you tell me where we stand on the 2022 penalties that was sent to collection, the $5,000, the very last? Did the state collect?
So I will say I do not know that for certain. I just don't have the information on to whether that has been collected. I know if it exceeds past a certain point of revenue, it gets referred to the AG's office for collection. Don't believe that one was high enough for that referral. So I'm not certain. One thing I will say, though, is that because of, I won't say because of an uptick necessarily, but Mr. Gribble and I spoke about how we mitigate that problem in the future with collections, and we have implemented a matter to where that will I won't say no longer be an issue, but that there will be a resolution for when that situation occurs.
So my question to you is, by them not paying their civil penalties, have they violated a statute?
So at the stage of a consent order, no, it is not a final order of the board. There is a violation under professional conduct for violation of a final order from the board. A consent order essentially, let's see, 2022. So for a separate violation to occur on that, it is in the form of a final order following a formal hearing. That if you get an order from the board that says you have to pay X amount of money and you don't do it, then that is a violation of that professional conduct of failing to follow the order of the board, essentially.
So what does the board need to do to move that direction?
So for this one, in terms of complaint number 2022-035-741, that complaint is closed in the sense that it has been, they signed a consent order, that's been resolved. So in the sense of, I understand that they didn't pay it, it was ultimately sent to collections, but for purposes, that wouldn't be something I could file a complaint with the APD on, since the resolution of that complaint has occurred. Essentially, that is for the collections division to, the ball essentially has moved from our court to their court. As I stated, we do have a mechanism in place that if anyone ever does that in the future where something is sent to collections, more action will occur than it just goes to collections, and we may see it, we may not.
I guess that was my question, is if we issue this civil penalty, what's the repercussions if they do nothing? And I go to what Mr. Nash says, they didn't even respond. They just, no offense, that's just sort of flipping your nose.
I've got a
at
couple
us.
questions about that as well.
So to go back to your, I think, very first question about why 2000, typically what I want what I try and do is I recommend a more conservative aspect, because the last thing I want to do is, it give the impression that I'm trying to rile the board up and make you be more aggressive than you feel comfortable with. That's why it always starts there. But if it needs to be raised, that is always within the board's purview. And if you feel that's necessary, I always encourage that. Specifically, I'm happy to answer the question. We added language to our consent order that if it is sent to collections, if you sign a consent order saying, yes, we agreed, we violated these laws, these facts are accurate, and we'll pay this money, and you don't do it, we freeze your license until you pay it. Anything you do in that interim, it's unlicensed activity, and we will certainly open a complaint if that occurs in the interim.
So, a couple questions. Number one, I'm sure you tried to reach out to him since he didn't respond.
Yes.
And no response.
Yes, I will say for this particular establishment, that is very common.
And next question would be, as a licensed funeral establishment, they have an obligation, if there is a complaint, to respond to the complaint. Correct?
Correct, yes.
And this has happened 1, 2, 3, fourth time in the last 3 years, 4 years, 2 to 3 years. And the same situation with the civil penalties. So I don't think that increasing the penalty is going to help, because I don't think they're going to do anything. I don't think they're going to pay. They're not obviously not worried about it. So are we able to, as a board, and this is, I guess a question for both of you guys, are we able to temporarily suspend an establishment license until the person responds and or pays a civil penalty?
I don't know that it could be predicated in that manner. I think the board could decide, we're just going to suspend the license, we're going to send this consent order, and they don't agree to it, we'll have a formal hearing. I think that's permissible. I don't think we can essentially say, you can't operate until you respond.
Right, okay.
If that makes sense.
I'm sorry, Ms. Stevens.
We have to consider the consumer as well, because they're not responding to the state. They're not responding to the family. They're not paying their debts. They've got bad checks. They've got bad debt. There's a lot of stuff going on here. And if you, as Mr. Nash said, and Mr. Wheeler, if we have this penalty that is for them to pay, they're not going to pay it. It puts this board in a terrible situation.
It absolutely does. And one thing I'll say is that I guess some inside baseball on kind of where complaints go once they leave here. So I draft that consent order, I send it out. They have 30 days from days of receipt to respond to it, and sometimes places need a little more time. I don't file a notice of hearing and charges on day 31 and we move forward with a formal hearing, because this board is, I think, generally very successful at resolving complaints with consent orders, and I try and keep it as efficient as possible. We feel with this one, this is one that I agree, based on the disciplinary history, is a continuous bad actor, and I am perhaps naively optimistic that our updated language in that consent order regarding when you put your name to paper and you put your word behind that you're going to pay a civil penalty and that you're responsible for it, that will carry more weight. And if they fall back on that agreement, then there will be severe consequences.
Say that one more time. I apologize. That last.
Sure.
What you said.
Yeah. So essentially, that if you put your word on that consent order that you're responsible for that civil penalty or whatever it may be, and you send the consent order back, but don't send the check, or it comes in as a bad check, that based on that updated language we've added to that document, there will be severe consequences for any respondent who does that.
What if they don't even acknowledge the consent order you send them?
Then we bring them in for a formal hearing.
So that was my question. We see the last 3, they didn't even pay. That's all went to collections and all, and and how can? I guess my question's this: under what rule or code can we go ahead if the motion's made to immediately suspend their establishment license.
Yeah, that's certainly within the board's purview. And instead of a civil penalty or in addition to a civil penalty, the board can suspend the license. I think as far as, I wish I had better information for you on the collections. The reason I don't is because it operates outside of my office, and I just don't have the information for what that looks like.
Well, I guess I would say this. I mean, the track record's there of not wanting to pay. And I'm going to be just quite honest with you and the board and everybody else. To levy a $2,000 penalty, I don't think it's going to do anything to them. So I would, I'll wait for discussion to be completed, and then I'm ready to make a motion.
I think that
Do we know anything now about the death certificate, just out of curiosity?
They've not received.
That was as of October. I'm just making
Yeah,
sure.
this was one of those complaints that we get referred to us that never really have a lot of information. I had reached out to the complainant a while ago, sat on this one a little bit, trying to get a response, trying to get the board some more information to work with, and I unfortunately just don't have that information, unfortunately. But one thing I did want to clarify, just to make sure, Mr. Wheeler, that you're thinking on it. So if a motion's made to suspend the license, that would come in the form of a consent order. It doesn't, the meeting doesn't conclude with their license suspended. And you may already be well aware of that. I just wanted to make sure for the record. So that would be something that, again, we would send. They would maybe sign, maybe not. And if they didn't, then we'd bring them in for a hearing.
got
I just counted this up, but if this civil penalty is imposed, that's $10,000 that they have not paid. And I just think that's, it is it's flippant to the family not getting their death certificate, and it's flippant to the state. Mr. Wheeler?
I've got one more question, because I think I know where this is headed. Can we? So when we authorize we do a civil penalty and we authorize a consent order and a formal hearing, if necessary, can we demand a formal hearing? That may be the wrong term to say, but can we require the respondent to come before the board?
I think it is possible, but one thing I would caution on is that if there is a way to settle it via consent order, which history suggests maybe there isn't, but
That's my point here.
right, if there is, then that is the preferred way to do it because it is much more efficient. As this board found out, sometimes formal hearings can take a little while. They can be expensive and they can sometimes be inefficient. If there is a way that we can send this consent order, they sign it, don't send the money, license is frozen because of that language we've added. Maybe they send the money. Maybe we get it closed out. Maybe this is the lightning that strikes. So I will say, per your question, honestly, I'm not sure. But I do think just saying we're not going to worry about the consent order, they need to come in, is a little bit of a double-edged sword since it's not always the most efficient.
That's something I think we should know as board members, if that's something, because if there's ever a severe situation, I'm going to make a motion that we suspend the license and authorize a consent order for a formal hearing.
Let me ask one question, then I want to ask on yours. How long do they have once they receive the penalty? What is the time frame to pay it?
So the consent order is due within 30 days of receipt, and the language in that consent order says specifically, when you send this consent order in, the money is supposed to be with it.
Okay.
So it's supposed to be at the same time.
Okay. So, Mr. Nash, with your motion, were you including the $2,000 penalty?
I'm sorry. Yes, I apologize. I make a motion that the $2,000 civil penalty, suspend the license, and authorize a formal hearing, unless that's too many things we can put into one thing.
So I guess for suspension of licensure, there needs to be, I guess, a time period of, because it can't be an informal suspension of you're suspended until you sign or pay the consent order, because that's not within the board's purview to just, per this board meeting, suspend a license and then say, while you get the consent order figured out, you're suspended.
What do you think, time frame? Would 60 days be enough on the time frame with the consent order for the suspension of the license? Or is that too much?
So just to clarify, what the motion would be is $2,000 civil penalty and a 60-day, essentially 2-month suspension. That when they put pen to paper, sign that consent order, the $2,000 better be with it. And when we receive it and process it, their 60 days start on the suspension. Is that?
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
Hold on.
If I can make a suggestion about the suspension, if you'll make it effective the first day of the month following our receipt of the consent order, because sometimes when they sign that consent order, they have funerals already scheduled. This is how. So what if it's agreeable to the board, and you might want to consider that if they'll sign the consent order, then the suspension will begin on the first day of the month following our receipt of the consent order. That way there's a definite time. They know not to take any more calls. And because here's what happens if it's like you were talking about a minute ago. We've got a funeral Monday and our license gets suspended Sunday. What do we do?
Exactly.
So
Let me try this one more time. I make a motion to authorize the civil penalty of $2,000 and a suspension of the license for 60 days on the first of the month following the return of the consent order, and authorizing a formal hearing if necessary. Does that sound correct?
I second that motion with the amendments.
Ms. Bohannon, did you get that? I want to make sure you're caught up. I mean, I'm serious.
It's been a long day.
Okay. Got a motion by Mr. Nash, second by Mr. Wheeler, for a $2,000 civil penalty and then a 60-day suspension following the receipt of the consent order and authorization for a formal hearing if necessary. All in favor, respond by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 10, Mr. Bryant.
Number 10 is complaint number 2025-05031. This case was administratively opened following a routine inspection conducted on January 30th, 2025. During the course of this routine inspection, the inspector observed the following. Respondent had employed a funeral director embalmer whose licenses had expired on December 31st, 2024, and did not meet the requirements for reinstatement until January 21st, 2025. During this unlicensed period, the employee served in the capacity of a licensed funeral director for 4 individuals and was listed as the embalmer for 1 decedent. The manager of respondent's establishment replied, stating that during the unlicensed period, they were unaware of the lapse in the employee's licensure, but once notified, the employee was removed from their duties as a funeral director and embalmer until they had renewed with the state. Based on the above, we'd recommend a $250 civil penalty, authorized via consent order, and a formal hearing if necessary.
Mr. Lee, on previous ones, just at this meeting, they were $500 penalty. Is that correct?
Now, this is the establishment, and the next two, I am assuming, are companion cases on his funeral director and embalmer's license.
That's
This is the
correct.
establishment.
And Ms. Stevens, maybe to provide a little bit of insight of why this one's $250 as opposed to $500, which the board feels more comfortable $500, please just go with $500. It will not hurt my feelings at all. So on this one I thought was a little distinguished by a couple of things. One, no disciplinary history, which is always great to see. And 2, this was the one where this appears to have been caught prior to the inspection. 9 days, it was reinstated 9 days prior, so the state didn't have to tell them your license is expired. You need to get that taken care of, which also is preferable. And likewise, the establishment did some mitigation attempt of, as soon as they found out, they took that employee off the floor. I actually spoke to the employee, and they said that's 100% true. I did not work until I got my things figured out. So if that is enough to essentially put it at $250. That's okay. If the board feels more comfortable with $500, that is also perfectly okay.
Again, I guess I go back to what we've discussed, not much this meeting, but at prior board meetings, how they're notified ahead of time through email, mail. I mean, it's just hard to take a lot of, or give a lot of sympathy or empathy to somebody who knows. It's just like your driver's license, your car tags, your house insurance. These things come due. They're set on a date. It is our responsibility, if you want to maintain and practice, to keep your license up or have your establishment license. So I sort of agree with Board Member Stevens, and I think $500 would be the civil penalty for the establishment.
Did we have a motion and all of that? Okay.
For the 200th time today, I'll make a motion that we accept council's recommendation, but move the civil penalty from $250 to $500.
I'll second that.
Have a motion by Mr. Wheeler and a second by Ms. Stevens. A recommendation of $500 civil penalty and authorized via consent order and formal hearing if necessary. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Number 11 and 12.
Next complaints are complaint numbers 2025-005041, which represents the respondent's funeral director's license, and complaint number 2025-005051, which represents the respondent's Embalmers license. This case was administratively open following a routine inspection conducted on January 30th, 2025. During the course of this routine inspection, inspector observed the following. This employee is the employee from the previous complaint who allowed their both licenses to lapse from December 31st, 2024 to January 21st, 2025, and acted in the capacity of a funeral director for 4 decedents and was listed as the embalmer for 1 decedent in that time. Respondent apologized for the mistake, stating that as soon as they received the notice of their licenses having lapsed, they made their boss at the establishment aware, and they were no longer permitted to do any license activity until the licenses had been renewed. Respondent stated that the first notices were not received, as the email that is on file with the department is an email respondent no longer uses. Respondent stated they took full responsibility for the mistake and apologized for its occurrence. Based on the above, would recommend a $500 civil penalty to be assessed as a $250 civil penalty against respondent's funeral director's license and a $250 civil penalty against respondent's embalmer's license, authorized via consent order and formal hearing if necessary.
Any discussion or motion?
Are his license in good standing now? Okay. I go ahead and make the motion for the 251st time today to accept the council's recommendation.
We have a motion by Mr. Wheeler to accept council's recommendation of a $500 civil penalty, $250 for funeral director's license, and $250 for embalmer's license. Do we have a second on the motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. Haynes. All in favor respond by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 13.
Complaint number 13 is 2025-005091. This case was administratively open following a routine inspection conducted on January 16th, 2025. During the course of this routine inspection, the inspector observed the following. The manager of respondent establishment had allowed their funeral director's license to expire on October 31st, 2024. It was not renewed until November 28th, 2024. The inspector determined that no services were conducted during the unlicensed period. However, respondent establishment did have an unlicensed individual operating as manager from November 1, 2024 through November 28th, 2024. Manager of respondent establishment replied, stating that they were unable to renew their funeral director's license because their 10 continuing education hours were not all accepted by the funeral board. Manager stated they were unaware that 5 of the 10 continuing education hours needed to be in person and that they were not able to fulfill the 5 in-person hours until late November due to scheduling conflicts with the CE program and their other place of employment. Based on the above, we'd recommend a $500 civil penalty authorized via consent order and formal hearing if necessary.
I make a motion, we accept legal's recommendation of $500 civil penalty.
I have a motion by Ms. Stevens to accept council's recommendation, $500 civil penalty. Second by Mr. Porch. All in favor, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Bryant, as always. Appreciate you. Mr. Gribble, we have the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. President, board members. First thing is a legislative update. This is the same report that we had from last month. House Bill 0860 and Senate Bill 1149, funeral directors and embalmers. Looks like that's moving through the process at the current time. The second one, House Bill 1286, Senate Bill 1145, appears that that's not moving through the process, that it is stalled and not moving. And the last one, even though it doesn't directly affect this board, regarding cemeteries, and funeral directors would have interest in that, is House Bill 0713, Senate Bill 0715, moving through the process as well. There are other bills that will affect this board in some manner, and some others you may be interested in that's not listed here, but there's a website for the bill searches. And once whatever legislation's passed that affects the board, then we'll give you a report that has the public chapter in it, so you know exactly how the legislation was passed. We'll make it part of the minutes so that the licensees will be aware of it as well, and do a email out to the licensees if we need to make them aware of different changes in the laws and rules. Licenses issued. This is a report of licenses administratively approved by the Executive Director pursuant to the Board Authority for the period of February 8, 2025 through March 28, 2025. Disciplinary action report. This is a report of consent orders that have been administratively accepted and approved by the Executive Director pursuant to Board Authority and as reported on the January 2025 and February 2025 Regulatory Board disciplinary action reports. You have a list of the respondents, their location of violations, and what the civil penalties was on those. I didn't mention closed establishments. This time we don't have any, so that's a good thing. None have reported closing. As far as complaints, as of March 28, 2025, we had 41 complaints against funeral directors and/or embalmers and 38 against establishments, for a total of 79 complaints pending. That's my report. If you have questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
That's a lot of license issues.
I was thinking the same thing.
I don't know if I've seen a report that big.
Should we give a special note to these new licensees to make sure they renew their license on time? Like a little red card, don't let it expire.
You know, I think when we go through a 2-year cycle of these people not renewing their license and they understand that we have to do our in-person CE, I think that we'll be beyond that, but we're still in that 2-year process, and I think you'll continue to see complaints.
I have people ask me all the time, where can I get CEs? I said, you can come to the board meeting for one, and it's in person. So see how many showed up. So
If we don't have any questions for Mr. Gribble, I'll accept a motion to accept the Executive Director's report.
So move.
Motion by Mr. Wheeler, second by Mr. Porch. All in favor, respond by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Do we have any applicants that appear before the board today?
Yes, sir. Individual applicant. The gentleman is appearing via Teams. It's an application for Javon Jermaine Tucker of Mississippi, who is a funeral director, licensed previously, and he's applying for reapplication. Funeral director license of the applicant was first approved on February 15, 2012. The license expired February 29, 2016. A reapplication was approved on October 11, 2017, and the license expired again October 31, 2021. The applicant is seeking licensure as a funeral director, and multiple disciplinary actions have been taken against this license. Based on the application, the board may, among other pertinent statutes and rules, specifically examine the applicability Tennessee Code Annotated 62-5-317 and making a determination as to whether the applicant meets the requirements for licensure.
Mr. President, I'm going to have to recuse myself.
All right, Mr. Wheeler Mr. Wheeler. Look, I'm tired, y'all. Mr. Naylor, for the record, is recusing himself.
I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I'm trying to unmute Mr. Mr. Tucker, can you say something?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Tucker. I'm
Good
Mr.
afternoon,
Lee.
sir.
I'm the president of the board. And first of all, just introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll get into your application.
Yes, sir. Well, I've been in the funeral profession for many years now. It's a calling. It's a ministry. I enjoy and I love what I do. Pastor church here in Mississippi. And that's about it.
All right. Just out of curiosity, why did your license, I guess, lapse, or maybe twice, I guess, or what happened in there that you don't
Yes, sir.
currently have a license, I guess?
Okay. Well, I got sick, and so I was in the hospital for some time. And so that time lapsed, the 90 days. And so I had to reapply.
Mr. Gribble, is there any history on the license or anything that board needs to know about, I guess, take consideration or anything?
Well, in the packet, you'll see where the license was suspended twice, at least twice, for non-payment of child support. Those were reinstated both times, and it may have been multiple times. Sometimes we don't get the suspension letter. We only receive the letter saying the person is back in compliance, and even though we get that letter, sometimes we don't get the first one to suspend it again. Also, there was another complaint back in 2020 that was resolved by the board issuing a letter of warning. Would you like to see a copy of that?
Yes, sir.
While he looks at that, Mr. Tucker, are you licensed in any other state?
Currently, no, sir.
Have you been licensed in any other states?
Was licensed in Mississippi, yes.
And why are you not
Just
presently
here.
licensed in the state of Mississippi?
Well, I hadn't renewed them yet, and I'm currently not practicing. Tennessee being my host city, I want to take care of Tennessee first.
But you
And
live
once
in
I'm able to get-
Mississippi, correct?
I just moved here, yes, sir, and on my way back to Tennessee.
So you're not licensed in the state of Mississippi for just not renewing your license?
That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Did I hear you correctly that you will be moving back to Tennessee
At some point, yes, ma'am.
in some point? Okay.
Mr. Tucker, are you currently employed at a funeral home?
No, sir, I'm not. Not currently.
What do you do currently for employment?
Well, currently I'm unemployed.
And you're also a pastor, I think you said?
Yes, sir. Pastor at a church here in Hernando, and wanting to get back out so I can practice.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Tucker, twice your license had been before the board for non-payment of child support, is that correct?
Well, it's a kind of a difficult case. It was an interstate case, and so they could not figure out how much I was supposed to pay, but they did release those, and thus I was able to renew my license.
Are you currently current with your child support?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Wheeler, there's documentation in the file there that will indicate as to what that amount was at one time. I don't
Okay.
think we have the documentation for another time, but it's perpendicular in your file where you kind of have to turn your head a little sideways to read it.
Mr. Gripple, what is required to get this reinstated? Does he have to take the Tennessee state law test again?
Yes, he has met the requirements for the board to consider the reinstatement. He has taken the Tennessee Laws and Rules test. That's good for a year. He took it, if I recall, I'm not looking at it right now, but it was in March of last year. He made application within the year. We just didn't have a meeting scheduled, so normally if that happens, it's not held against the person. He passed it on March 23, 2024. And he's done the 10 hours of continuing education, 5 of those being in person, and those are required to be within 90 days, Ms. Bohannon, 90 days of coming before the board for consideration of licensure.
Did he do the 5 hours of continuing education in Mississippi or in Tennessee?
No, he did. He did. It was education that was approved by the Tennessee board.
Okay.
If they don't have a license somewhere else, then they're required to do it in-person education that's approved by this board.
Okay, thank you.
And those 5 hours were completed on February 27, 2025, through the Tennessee State Veterans Cemetery in West Tennessee.
Mr. Gribble, when someone takes the law exam, how long is that? I thought it was a year.
It's good, according to the rule, it's good for 1 year from the time they take it.
So as of today, that would have been past a year.
It would be past a year. As of today, it would be beyond that. However, he made application within that year.
Yes, sir. Okay, that's what I thought.
The application date was February 28, 2025.
As far as the state is concerned, Mr. Gribble, he met all requirements, or is there any flags that would present him before us today? So it's something that, you know, he would.
So I do think there's a little bit of an unusual wrinkle in this one that more than anything just wanted the board to be aware of before they make a decision, either yes or no, is that my understanding is that Mr. Tucker, when filling out that application, there's a question in that application that states, have you ever had a license or applied for a license or its equivalent to practice in any profession or occupation that was denied, suspended, or revoked, or otherwise acted against? And Mr. Tucker checked yes for that. Later, Mr. Tucker explained that I checked yes by accident. That's not actually true. None of those actions were ever taken against my license. And Mr. Tucker did provide an affidavit stating that that was a complete accident. The issue there is that based on the child support issues in the past, the correct answer to that question was actually yes, and later submitted an affidavit saying, oh, the answer to that should have been no. So that does put the application in a little bit of a weird situation, because under 317, 62.5.317, which we've talked a lot about today, under A1, the board may, in this sense, refuse to grant any license under this chapter if, one, the applicant for or holder of the license obtained the license by fraud or misrepresentation, either in the application for the license or in passing the examination for the license. Obviously, nothing to suggest there was any fraud or misrepresentation in passing the exam, but it could be considered that by checking yes, then submitting an affidavit saying no, when the correct answer was yes, that could be considered misrepresentation. That's ultimately for the board to determine if that rises to the level of concern. That's completely within the board's purview, but that is the specific wrinkle on this application why we at least wanted the board to be aware of.
And to add to that a little bit further, when a person who's applying for a license answers yes to those questions, then that triggers us to ask for a affidavit, some information, and that's why we asked for the affidavit. Is that the affidavit wasn't submitted originally. The question was just answered yes, so we needed information as to why the question was answered yes, and then we asked for the affidavit and received the affidavit. It was executed on March 27. I think we received it the same day or the next day.
So you just have received this just a few days ago, the affidavit?
Yes, but now we didn't ask for it immediately. We asked for it. We went back and forth several times, but we didn't ask for it immediately after receipt of the application. But we did ask for it and set a deadline in order to get it in a time that this application could be presented to the board, and we did receive the the affidavit within that deadline time.
Any further questions or discussions, or the chair will entertain a motion?
I have a comment to Mr. Tucker. You've been
Yes,
listening.
ma'am.
You've been listening to our legal, and we deal with some folks that don't always follow the rules, and that's why
Yes,
this
ma'am.
board is very concerned about good, reputable folks serving, because there are some bad characters in the industry, and we just try to do the best we can as the board. So please understand
Yes,
that
ma'am.
that's the reason we're asking all these questions.
Nothing personal.
Yes, ma'am. And if I may say, I did reach out to the board concerning that. I immediately, upon Mr. Gribble emailing me that, I did send that to him. I looked at my license as being expired, and I just erroneously checked yes, it has been disciplined. And when I did talk to him and he made mention of it, that's when I realized that I made a mistake. But it's not in any way to fraud. I love the profession. I have compassion for it, and never would do anything to make any of us look bad.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? If not, the chair will entertain a motion. We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Porch to approve Mr. Tucker's reinstated funeral director license. We have a second.
I trust you, okay? I trust that you're going to do the right thing. So I will make
Yes,
a
ma'am.
motion to,
Second.
I'll second
There
it.
you
Lord mercy, what a day.
We have a second on the floor by Ms. Stevens. All in favor, please
Thank you, Ms.
respond
Stevens.
by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Tucker, congratulations, and stay in contact with Mr. Gribble or Ms. Bohannon, and they'll make sure everything gets in line for you, okay?
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
All right, Ms. Bohannon, next.
This Choice Cremation, we'll ask those representatives to come forward and speak at the podium, please. It's
Did you say choice, Mr. Gribble?
Choice
I found
Choice
it.
Cremation. It's Emily Grace Crow to be the manager, if the application is approved, to be located at 907 Rivergate Parkway, Suite A8 in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, 37072. Ownership a limited liability company, and the ownership to be Choice Cremation LLC.
Welcome, ladies. First of all, just introduce yourself, give us a little background on what's going on, and we'll get into the meat of it.
My name is Tammy Friedman. I've been in and around the funeral profession for over 30 years. I've been a co-owner and operations manager at funeral homes in Texas that I operated and owned. And the last 5 years I've been here in Tennessee and served as a family service counselor and as a pre-need sales agent. In the last year and a half, I've run the Golden Envelope, which helps families with advanced planning and after-loss services.
And I'm Emily Crow. I've been a funeral director for the last 4 years here in the state of Tennessee, starting in East Tennessee and worked my way to the middle of Tennessee after getting licensed.
And bear with us just a little bit. We're just looking at all the paperwork. Is this just a cremation facility?
It is. Choice Cremation is going to provide online services for arrangements, for direct cremation only.
So is this, I guess, what we refer to as a storefront?
Storefront,
And
yes, sir.
cremations will be done off premises?
Yes, sir.
Music City Crematory?
Yes.
So, question, when someone dies in a home or in a facility such as a medical center or they're at the local medical examiner's office, how long would it be before you, once the family's contracted with you to take care of the cremation, where and how long will you be in making the removal, and where will the decedent be housed?
The decedent, once the call is initially taken, we will then use Music City Mortuary to go and make the removal. So depending on the time frame with the call coming in and the hospital, say an institution or the medical examiner giving us approval to come pick them up, we will make them immediately or as soon as that can be done.
And the reason I bring this up, it has come to my attention that several hospitals have begun to complain about decedents being left in their morgue 2 weeks or longer, and the medical examiners are stating that decedents are being left there until the money's received for payment and all the paperwork's done, and 3 weeks later they're come and pick the decedent up. And as an older funeral director, long-time licensed, probably before you all were born, this is just not the way we were taught. And there are beginning to probably be a few complaints that's all come before this board to some establishments that are just cremation facilities only, and they are leaving decedents in, like I say, facilities. And I have a lot of problems authorizing license of an establishment that's using a medical center or a medical examiner's office to hold their bodies for them, because that's not their jobs.
Right.
The family is contracting with you all to do a service, just like the families contract with our establishments. And that's my greatest concern, is decedents, someone's loved one, being left in a facility for 7 days, 14 days, because that is not what that family's expecting.
That is not our standard of care. And as soon as we get that call to be released, we will initiate that care transfer, and it will be the decedent will be taken to Mortuary City, Music City Mortuary immediately.
And that's where they will be held.
Yes.
Until all your paperwork.
Until the paperwork
So
is complete.
let me ask you this. What will you do with a family, let's say grandma passes away at home, she's been under hospice care, and Music City goes and makes the removal, brings her into her care, but the family says, they come in the next day with you and they say, well, my son's been in the service and he's flying in Saturday and he wants to see his grandmother before where will the viewing and all that take place?
Music City does have a room there that we can use for the viewing.
For private family
for
viewing.
private family viewing.
Is that part of the agreement, and is that on the paperwork with the state?
What are you referring to
Like,
with the state?
like when Mr. Gribble or whoever, is it on the paperwork that there's viewing?
Where you have your paperwork from Music City, that signed by,
It does say services and, let's see.
I'm gonna have to get Miss Bohannon and get me my iPad.
Just hit the button.
I never get.
Here.
Where's your stuff?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Music City Mortuary did
Yeah, on
provide a
the,
letter
it's
of,
page 14, yeah. I think that's what Mr. Wheeler's referring to. It'll be page 14 of the documents. While he's looking for that, I have a quick question. That was one of my questions. On the photographs of the exterior of the building, let me slide back through here. Okay, now I see it. I looked over, I'm sorry, I overlooked the picture. I see it now. I went too far. The only thing that you share with other tenants is just the restrooms,
just the restrooms, yes.
and so that the entrance walks right into your front
Private
reception area.
entrance,
Okay.
yes, yes.
And you never plan on bringing any decedents to that facility whatsoever.
No. We're not set up for
And
that.
I noticed that you said it is a primarily direct cremation business, but on your general price list, you list embalming and some other things.
Like that reference Mr. Wheeler mentioned, if grandma has, it's a week later, we would recommend, Emily as the funeral director would recommend embalming to the family for preservation.
Okay. But as far as any other like services and things like that, if you're still going to offer those at other facilities, I guess? Like
Yes,
churches and things?
if someone wanted to do a visitation, it would be at a church or event venue.
Okay. And also on, last question, I promise.
It's okay.
Let me slide through here. With your background being in pre-need, do you all plan to offer pre-arrangements? I thought I saw somewhere that it said no.
Not during the first year.
Not during the first year. Okay. All right, thank you.
Over the course of the past 2 or 3 years, we've had other storefront companies come before us. And one of the things that we have asked for in the past, and Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, is a picture of the viewing room. And we did have a storefront come back to us, and they showed us where the viewing would take place. And unfortunately, it was right beside the retort. And so we had to go back and get additional information. Our concern is for the consumer.
Sure.
We don't want the consumer to think that a cremation is going to take place and they're able to go see their loved one. They may not have a church. They may not have a venue. So how would you handle that?
We understand that we're not going to serve every cremation family, and there are reputable funeral homes that are more traditional that could accommodate them, and we're prepared to make those recommendations.
And the viewing room at Music City, do you all have that?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't have the picture of it. I didn't know that was required, but it is a private room with a closed door. And that's something too, again, we're focusing on families that are choosing direct cremation and not with a viewing necessarily.
The only comment I'd make on that, I mean, I work for a large establishment. We do over 1,300 services a year. Most of my cremation families view. It's not just pick them up and cremate them. Somebody wants to see them before we cremate them. And there lies my greatest concern, is the facility. We don't want to see family go in next to a retort unless they specifically want to watch their loved one be cremated. And I wished I had a picture of Music City's viewing room.
All right, I lied. One more question. Touch on this viewing subject. So if someone wanted to do an ID viewing or a private viewing prior to cremation, is there a separate charge for that? Because I don't feel like I see that on your general price list. Or does Music City charge a fee that you guys would be charging to the family?
Yes, you're correct. It is not on our general price list. It's something that isn't, it would be a one-off in our experience or in our model rather than a standard in like a traditional funeral home.
But still, if you offer a service, it must be on your general price list. You cannot just add things as you wish.
Sure.
Because it's very specific that, like at 1st of January of 2025, if you go up on your prices, you have to do a whole new price list and change your dates and everything has to be on your price list of what services you're offering. So this isn't something you can open a business and a week later someone say, I want to see grandma, and you say, well, she'll be at Music City, here's where you go, and that's going to be $450 when it's not on your price list. You cannot do that.
I understand.
On your establishment inspection report, and Mr. Bozeman did sign off on that, or he's the field representative's signature. Down below, it says licensed funeral director, and it has NA. Could you tell me what that means?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Your establishment inspection report by Mr. Bozeman?
Yeah, I didn't see a copy of that.
Yeah. It says.
Ms. Stevens, I think what he's meaning is that there's no other directors besides the manager employed by the establishment.
Is that what he means?
I think so, yeah. Is that, Mr. Gribble, is that?
That's correct. That's what he means.
We have when he came in, we have a different report that he did.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So there'll be 2 employees, and let's just say Ms. Crow is getting married and on her honeymoon. Who would be working at the company during her vacation or time off, or?
We would, with us being with Music City, asking them to do some of our contract work, we would contract it through Music City to have them send a director at that time, depending on what business is.
So I found Music City, the letter, all it states is this letter is confirmed that Music City Mortuary is contracted with Choice Cremation to perform all embalmings, and Music City Cremation Services contracted with Choice Cremation to perform all cremations, and that's all it says. It doesn't say anything about viewings or anything.
Would that not fall under the cremation services?
Well, that's a letter from Music City, so are you speaking for Music City that you can use their view room and they're not stipulating that in their letter?
No, that was part of the agreement. It was important to.
It's not in their letter from Music City.
Mr. Lee brought something to my attention too. On your statement of funeral goods and services, which is an example for Mr. Joe Johnson, deceased, his name of the purchaser is Ellen Johnson. It has additional services, ID viewing, $200.
Yes, this is from an example from the software program that I'll be using.
Right, but you don't have.
In your general price list.
price list.
No.
This wasn't from my general price list. It was just an
No,
example.
I understand that, but it's not, you don't have a charge for an ID viewing on there.
I think Ms. Stevens is saying is that it has to mirror what's on what you give us has to mirror
The price
list. With the price list. Generally, when an applicant submits a statement of funeral goods and services, it's a blank copy, just to ensure that it is in. Lost my word. Is it in order with as far as the FTC funeral rule? And so that's what I asked you about the ID viewing on the GPL. It's not on, and I didn't see that on the when I looked at the statement of goods and services. So
For
Do
us,
you guys have questions for us about anything?
I mean, as far as the general price list, that's an easy fix. I can
Sure.
easily include that while I'm here today even. And I understand your point. It is something that wasn't originally our model, but I do know that there are those one-offs that will happen, and I need to be prepared for those. So that's not that we wouldn't, but if that's something that's important, it is important, so I would make that, it's an easy edit.
and as far as the statement of funeral goods and services, when setting up Parting Pro, we were trying to get them our GPO, but we
Sure.
had to select certain things to get it to print.
Sure,
Or
sure.
else you guys would get one with our header and nothing else involved.
Sure, I understand.
You understand, though, what Mr. Nash is saying, your GPL must match
Yes.
your statement of goods and services, and we're not getting a match. Just like I don't see that Music City is granting you permission for ID viewing. He says he'll do your embalmings and cremations, but nothing about ID viewings and all. So there's a few things I would make the recommendations, go back, let's get everything corrected and get it in order as it needs to be, and then bring it before the board.
And to that point, the inspector did look over everything thoroughly, and I did pass the inspection report, and that was not brought up at that time,
So he was inspecting your facility,
and reviewing my general price list.
and
all
they are
those.
inspectors, but we, the board, are the ones that license you. And we have these issues and questions. And before I can vote on a license, I want to be sure. I'm not saying you're not telling me the truth with Music City, but I don't see anything stating that you can use their facilities for viewing. And my greatest concern, and I go back to what Ms. Stevens says, is my consumer and my family. That is what I want them to be when they choose a facility or an establishment, that they get the services that they're paying for, and there's no confusion.
And I would like to see that viewing room and what it looks like, because we just can't, we have that responsibility to know what that looks like.
So, Mr. Gerbil, can we ask them to come back before the board or submit those documents before the next board meeting to the board for us to look
Do you want
at?
the inspector to go back out and do another inspection, gather those documents?
Yes, please.
And address
I
those-
would like to.
And address those issues
Can I-
that you mentioned.
Can I, so I don't, my personal opinion, I don't feel like it's necessary for an inspector to go back out. I feel like I trust Mr. Bozeman in his inspection, but I think that if the board saw fit, we could.
Could they provide that to Mr.
They could provide that
Gribble?
to you, Mr. Gribble, and then we provide a motion to approve the license granted that those things are provided to you within a certain period of time. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say? Or this, so we need, I guess the things that we need is that the GPL, the general price list corrected, the letter from Music City saying that they will contract, you all will contract with them to do embalmings, cremations, and then the use of their viewing facility. A picture of that. It's a pretty significant list, but can you approve it in our, like you do with other license approvals?
I can if you give me the authority. Here's my hesitancy.
Yes, sir.
There's 7 board members. I know generally what you expect, but when it involves like this viewing room, there's some discretionary authority
Sure.
there
Sure.
and opinions. And my suggestion is that the documentation be submitted and it come back before you at the next meeting. That way you make the decision. And if it was just something, if it was merely something that I could look at and say, make a check mark, maybe even consult with Mr. Bryant, and we say, yes, it's checked. But when it becomes something that's not as clear cut,
I understand.
then I don't want to make a decision that pleases 4 of you and displeases 3 of you. If
Sure.
that decision is
I
made, I'd
understand
rather the
that.
board make it than me make it.
I understand that. So, like my colleagues have said, our responsibility is to the consumer, in the state of Tennessee. And there have been other applicants we've made that have had to do similar things. So I guess I'm going to make a motion that we get those things corrected and you guys resubmit, and we will have a board meeting next month. Correct?
May 13 is the next scheduled board meeting.
And we would I guess it'll be a reapplication. But I do not think that we need to require a second inspection. I realize, once again, I've provided a mess of a motion here, so tell me how to clean it up and I will.
Yeah.
Been that type of day.
And I think this board wants to be consistent with what we've done
Correct.
with other facilities.
So if I need to formalize it again, tell me.
I'll second what he said.
Hold on.
No, essentially, I was just going to suggest that I do think the best mid-ground here is just what was moved for, that just table the application for now. Let's get those items addressed and in front of the board next time, and we can try and get that taken care of at the May 13th meeting.
So
We're going to meet in May.
That is my understanding, unless my boss tells me otherwise.
2 months.
yeah, it's long.
There won't customer re-inspections, all right?
Right. I don't think so. So my motion will be to correct those things: the general price list, the letter from Music City stating that you have you're contracting with them to do those 3 things, the photograph of the viewing room. Is that it? 1, 2. That was the 3 things.
The general price list
And
edits.
I said the general price list edits, and then, but I don't think we need to require a re-inspection on those things.
So basically, your motion is just to table this application till the May meeting when they can bring back.
With the correction.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Mr. Wheeler, you seconded his motion.
Mr. Gribble, Mr. Bryant, did that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, just double checking.
All right, we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Nash, second by Mr. Wheeler, to table the application and for them to return with the items requested to the May meeting for consideration for licensure. Is that correct? All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Next is Scales Starks Funeral Service Incorporated. The proposed manager is A. Brandon Starks. This is to be located 810 Dominican Drive, Suite 302, Nashville, Tennessee, 37228. Initial establishment application, a for-profit corporation, Scales Starks Funeral Service Incorporated as being the owner. Those representatives would come forth.
We actually went to the restroom.
Okay, we'll get the next one then. Mr. President, do you want to wait or you want to move to the next one?
Yeah, can we just wait?
Please. Mr. Lee.
Let me make sure they can work that.
Oh, never mind. Never mind.
I mean, if she didn't have to, let's just go. Tell her, leave it alone, Lisa. She can. Leave it alone.
That's fine.
We are? You sure? She don't have the password.
That's okay.
Who's next?
All right, Mr. Gribble, let's go to the next one, I guess. We can get Mr. Starks and then when he gets back.
Okay, the next one is Stevens Funeral and Cremation Services. Proposed manager is Philip Charlin, to be located at 105 Southeast Parkway, Suite 110, Franklin, Tennessee, 37064. Initial establishment application, the ownership to be an LLC, and the owners to be Stevens Funeral and Cremation Services, LLC, in Franklin, Tennessee.
President Lee,
I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
I have been told I don't have to, but I am willingly going to recuse myself. It's a personal issue regarding Dad's legacy.
All right, gentlemen, if you would, just introduce yourself, give us a little background, and then we'll go into the application, please.
My name is Casey Stevens. Been in the funeral industry pretty much my whole life, throughout a family business growing up in Williamson County. A few years ago, our family sold our family business, and from there I left that company and now work with Lawrence Funeral Home in Chapel Hill and Heritage Funeral Home in Columbia, and looking to kind of start Stevens Funeral and Cremation Service in Franklin to have another choice for families in that community.
My name is Philip Sharland. I've been licensed in Tennessee since 2012. And prior to that, I was licensed in Virginia and Washington, D.C. since 2004.
And is this what we refer to as a storefront?
It would be, yes, sir. And the photos you're probably looking at they've been updated, and I have those here if you want to see them.
Your microphone, Mr. Lee.
Just saying I hadn't gotten to that point just yet, if anybody else has, but. So where's Heritage Funeral Home and Cremation Services?
Columbia, Tennessee.
All right, and they're a new establishment as well?
No, sir.
Okay. I looked at files examined, said 0 new. It threw me off just a minute. So will it all be that you're offering is cremation services through that location? Or
It would be cremation and funeral services
funeral?
and traditional, yes, sir.
What type of building is that? Look like garage doors, or is that something different? or-
That's in a back industrial space. The front
Okay.
office, the front is just office space, yes, sir.
And what exactly will be going on at this storefront facility?
It would just be there to make arrangements with families.
So on the arrangement office, 40 of 46, there's no door knob.
If you would look at the new pictures, you'll be able to see it's all been redone since those photos.
Are the restrooms private or shared with another business?
Private.
Are they handicapped accessible?
I believe so.
So all your funeral services will be taking place at Heritage, is that correct?
I've partnered with a few different churches in the county that will allow me to use their facilities for funeral services and visitation, but if the families choose to use Heritage or Lawrence Funeral Home, they can do so.
So Heritage is letting you use their visitation rooms, their selection room, their chapel.
Yes, sir.
So why open the storefront and not just use their arrangement office?
Because it would be closer for our families within Williamson County, the community that I want to serve there
So
to
you want to
meet.
serve a community, but your funeral home location is away from the community you want to serve.
No, it's not.
Okay, then I misunderstood your statement.
I've partnered with a few other churches within Williamson County to host services in Williamson County. Or we would use the families' churches that they attend to use for their services and visitation.
So a lot of families don't use a church, they'll just stay at the chapel or use a visitation room because they don't want the religious significance.
Sure, and there's a few places within Williamson County that I've identified for rental to use their facilities for services and/or visitation or celebration of life.
Will selections be made in your office?
Yes, sir. No, sir. It's all digital. It's all digital.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, all digital. All right. Mr. Wheeler, have you seen a letter from Heritage? I was just trying to look and
No, I have
make
not
sure
seen the letter, that's what I didn't.
if I hadn't over.
Do you have a letter from Heritage stating that you have the right to use their facilities?
Well, I own it, so I don't have a letter, no.
Correct me if I'm wrong, in looking at your general pricing.
Sure.
You offer cremation, but I see nothing about cremation with the family view or an ID charge for that.
There is under, I believe it's it's under services. I believe it's $395 for viewing.
I see staff and equipment for funeral service, $399. Supervising visitation, memorial service, $399.
So use of facilities and staff for viewing, $395.
But I don't see any of that with your cremation. I see where you offer that, so that's something that you would tell the family that they wanted to view, they had $395.
Yes, sir. It's not packaged.
So anybody's going to need to be prepared to go to Lawrence Funeral Home?
Yes, sir.
How far, just from me, I'm from West Tennessee?
Sure.
Chapel Hill and Franklin, or what's
Eh,
it, county-ish, or?
They're border counties. It's about a 25, 30-minute drive. Maybe 35.
And Heritage Funeral Home, is Columbia in the same frame
It's another boarding county. Yes, sir.
That's where the cremation.
Yes, sir. We have a retort there.
Questions or discussion, or Mr. Gribble, on the state's end as far as requirements? Is everything up to par, I guess, is whatever you, what you'd say?
The application is complete for your consideration.
Okay.
On your statement of goods and services, is that something is that a document that's completed through like a software?
It's
or
through
is that-
Need software, Passari.
Okay. It's 29, page 29. Have you established a phone number yet?
Currently, it's going to be my cell phone. We have applied for the phone number. We just haven't gotten it yet. And I have domain.
What?
Domain for website.
Website, okay.
So if I read your casket price list, you're going to offer 6 caskets and that's it, correct?
Through our model, yes. And if the family wants something different, then we would have to go to Matthew's full catalog. But for what we're going to offer for the digital selection room, it would just be the 6 choices. Yes, sir.
So the pictures you gave us are this. That's the same. It's a big change.
Yeah. It's a lot of work. But yes, it's the same building.
And is there, so, all right, there's like a front, like I'm gonna call it
So
reception
you walk in, it's going to be
area.
like a little reception office area, and then to your right is going to be basically an arrangement conference.
So like where behind the red chairs.
Yeah.
What's the door over there by the desk to the left side?
I don't know.
To the left of the hall, like that one?
It's a hallway that goes to the restroom, and then to that
Okay.
back space that's not for public.
Okay, I see how I can see it on this now. Do you ever plan to do anything here as far as any kind of like a private viewing room or anything like that?
It could be possible, but right now, no.
So you're saying that if Stevens Funeral and Cremation Services receives a call about calling the hospice, that the body will go to Lawrence Funeral Home, is that right?
If the body's to be embalmed, it would go to Lawrence.
Let's say it's not, it's going to be cremated.
We will take it to Heritage. That's where our retort is.
There's going to be a lot of movement of deceased from facilities.
No, from where they're picked up, they'll either go to 1 to 2 places.
But then, if they're having service or anything like that, there'll be more movement.
Like going to a church service, yes, sir.
And again, what's your time frame if you receive a call?
I would say within an hour. We have staff at both locations, and also I have a contract removal service if needed, but hopefully that won't be the case.
And you're the owner of Heritage, you stated, is that correct?
But one of them, yes, sir. The letter from Heritage only refers to the cremation.
Okay, therein lies a concern.
Okay.
If you're stipulating you're going to use their facilities, and I know you stipulate also you're a part owner of something, but I don't see anything that Heritage is granting you permission to use their chapel, visitation room, or anything, other than the crematory.
Okay. Well, I'll be happy to draw you up a letter.
It has to come from the board of director or whoever the owners are at Heritage. You can draw anything up. If there's more than one owner, it has to come from somebody.
Well, okay.
And all viewings would take place at Heritage, correct? For IDs of someone who's going to be cremated.
Yes, sir.
Definitely need something from Heritage on that.
So the phone number that's on the inspection.
Microphone.
The phone number that's on the inspection report, that's your cell phone? It's the 0906.
Yes, sir.
But you are planning on getting,
Yes, sir. The landline, yeah.
So you plan on having a landline, not a cell phone?
It would be a landline that would be transitioned over to cell phone for like after hours. That's right.
But we don't have a landline right now.
No, sir.
Again, I go back to the previous people that were here before us until certain things are, we have a letter from Heritage and I'll stipulate it. I mean, I don't want to go out on a limb and assume anything because as soon as you do, you wind up in trouble. So I would.
Does majority ownership matter, or do you need it from a minority partner too? So I'm not confused.
As most people, if there's multiple owners, it usually takes more than just one obligating an establishment to do something. What's your thoughts, Mr. Gribble?
I'm not an attorney.
It's just we always have a letter stipulating
So
the facility.
I think that what we go back to the previous applicant and what we've done in the past,
Yes.
that we required anything that you're going to do in another facility, we require a letter from them on letterhead signed by, I think it needs to be the establishment manager because that's on paper the person who's in charge of that facility. And as well as photographs of those facilities, because that's what we have required in the past.
Okay. Yeah. As for the application, I wasn't aware of those letters. It
Sure,
just
sure.
mentioned embalming and cremation.
Sure. And I think that we have, that's our, those are the things we required to in previous applications, and that's what would need to be required in this case.
This is, going to be pretty much every time. Is there something that the inspectors could be made aware of, so
That's it.
everybody's not
Or it just
running
says it on the
into
application.
Yeah,
It's
well,
never,
I guess.
it never said that.
Did for some reason I was thinking in the past, Mr. Gribble, that the inspectors took photographs of certain things or they were required to give them photographs of certain things.
A few years ago, we expanded the number of photos that the inspector makes. However, there's some discretionary authority by the board, and the inspector doesn't always know the things to ask for or to submit. And when the inspector's there, they're doing it, they're doing the inspection, and when they leave, they're not approving what's, they're collecting, they're the depository for the documents and the photos.
Sure.
And then they do the report, the report to the board. I'll be glad to pass along to them, the information that you've talked about today, so that in the future they will know to mention that to the applicant.
And in the inspection reports of those funeral homes, there should be photos. I mean, they're not in front of you now, but
Right. But
photos are taken of those facilities during the inspection reports for establishment renewal.
Yeah, the photos are made on the change of ownership. So when Mr. Stevens and the other people bought Heritage Funeral Home in Columbia and Lawrence Funeral Home in Chapel Hill, there had been photos made at that time.
right. But this being a new establishment, a new application, it will be.
But each time on the renewal, we don't make photos on the renewal.
Sure.
There's no.
Sure.
When they go out and do a normal inspection, unless they come across something that appears to be a violation, they do not make photos then.
Sure.
I go back to what Mr. Nash says. We can't ask one person or one establishment to try and get their license to do something and let another slide. So I think we require, and it's been the board's responsibility to be uniform on everything we do. And so I agree with Mr. Nash. I think we need these pictures. We need a letter. This is what we always require, and this is the way it should be.
So I think that I had one more question. That's all.
Who do I need to submit the letter to?
That Mr. Gribble.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have it done tomorrow.
When you submit the letter, if you want to go ahead and update your price list, that has the phone number on it.
Sure.
And when it's
Yeah,
issued and everything, submit all of it at one time.
I think that. So that's the other thing. If you've got the domain, we need to go ahead and have that on the general price list or anything that you're going to put it on as well.
Well, I think this one's a little different because they've already got operating funeral homes that are already authorized to do this in the state. Now, I can see the letter, he is part owner, but it seems like Mr. Grimble could get that letter and verify if it's accurate. But as far as taking more pictures, I think it's an already operating funeral home. And I think it's kind of, if I was fixing to get buried in Lawrence, but it's not good enough to me, be kind of questionable. It's like, it's kind of over. That's just my opinion. I'm not a funeral director.
No, sir, I understand.
But they're already operating. I just don't see why we would do that. I understand about the other one because it was that we had that one a couple years ago. It was a room right next to where they
Do the cremation.
Yeah, and it was just kind of, and we had asked about closing, having it in a closed room. But these are already operating, so I don't know why we would have to. But I do agree with the letter. I mean, if he's got a co-owner, I think that would be something that Mr. Grimble could get from him with a new update proving what they've done.
So I'll make the motion that we table this matter until the letter is received by Mr. Gribble, and we did I still want to see a picture. I know they're licensed, but they're licensed as an establishment. This is a new establishment that's going to be, I'd like to see what the ID viewing room might look like. That I'm more concerned about that than anything.
We have a motion by Mr. Wheeler to table the application until the items requested are received by the state and represented in May. Is that? Yes, sir. Is there a second on the motion?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Haynes. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
One no. Motion carries.
So just to be clear, Roy would be doing the photos, or do I need to submit photos, or how does that work? Or y'all go to the website?
Whatever the board wants. If the inspector goes back and does a reinspection, there's a $200 reinspection.
I think it's the same thing as the folks before. I don't think we need to require a reinspection. It would just be fixing those things and submitting them, and then we would.
Just email them to you. So you want photos of Lawrence Heritage? I just want to be clear on what you're asking.
I believe the photographs were for where the viewing took place, a letter from Heritage, and then updating those price list with the phone number and the website.
Sure.
Okay, going back to the previous establishment, Mr. President, then is Scales Clark's Funeral Service Incorporated. The proposed managers A. Brandon Starks to be located at 810 Dominican Drive, Suite 302, Nashville, 37228. It's a for-profit corporation with Scales Starks Funeral Service Incorporated as the owner.
Mr. President.
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun a little bit there. I'm sorry.
Ms. Stevens is back. Mr. Naylor's recusing himself, and we'll get started in just a second. All right, gentlemen, if you would, I'm sorry, if you would, I think you've seen the drill so far. Please introduce yourself, a little background, then we'll get into the application, please, sir. Thank you.
My name is A. Brandon Starks. I'm native Nashvilleian, licensed funeral director, graduate of John A. Gupton College here in Nashville. Been a licensed funeral director for 34 years. Worked in funeral service industry for 38 years. Formerly operated Scales Funeral Home on Jefferson Street. Closed in, I think, 2019. Gentrification, the area kind of changed, lost the lease. And been just helping other funeral directors and working in another industry and wanted to go back into funeral service. And decided through encouragement from another funeral director that actually in Brentwood that has an office space. She encouraged me. She's been doing it for a number of years and encouraged me to open an office space to reestablish myself back into the funeral industry.
Is this like a office building?
Yes, sir.
will you not be offering cremation services?
Yes, ma'am, we will.
I just see a line drawn through where the cremation authorization form is, and receipt of human remains, and receipt of cremated remains.
Yeah, it's actually on the general price list, the listing for cremation. I'm not sure why that's drawn
I
through.
don't either. All of them? Huh.
Because we did go over that, I did go over that with Mr. Bozeman, so I'm not sure about that. Because we did have a letter from Music City for the cremation.
As being in funeral industry yourself,
Yes, ma'am.
sharing restrooms in a building, some people are so overwhelmed with grief. Is there an opportunity to have private bathrooms in that?
So it's a very short distance, and there are actually 3 private restrooms. So it's only one person per restroom. So it's actually a private room. So when someone goes into the restroom, it's only one person in at a time.
Okay.
And there are actually 3 separate restrooms in that area.
And how many people are in that building that would be sharing the conference arrangement room?
So there are like several different suites in that particular section, and it just depends on how many people actually have clients at that time. My experience in having been there, most of the professionals that are in the suite are they're not businesses that have a large number of clientele there. There's a lot of counselors, attorneys, accountants, things of that nature. So it's not clients that have a large, high volume of clientele. So it seems to be a very quiet building, very serene.
Who is Legacy Memorial? Is that local
And
here?
actually in Springfield.
Springfield.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess Ms. Stevens brings up a good question. I know you say that it's fairly quiet, but there's attorneys and other people in the building, so I see the restrooms, what us country folks call one-holer, and you lock the door. So my question is, you get someone, and attorneys' offices have secretaries, attorneys, and they all coffee and everything else, and they go to the restroom. What's going to happen when you have a family that needs a restroom, and those restrooms, 2 or 3 are not a lot. I mean, one facility I have, we offer for a female's restroom, we have 5 stalls.
So let me say this. So each floor has more than just the 3 restrooms. So that's just on that particular wing of the building where I am. So if we walk down to the other end of the restroom in that other wing, there are also 3 other restrooms. So rarely would there be that number of people going to the restroom at the same time. So even the time that I've been there, rarely have there been anyone even in the restroom. It's just not that busy of a building. That was one of the reasons in looking at buildings, I chose that building because I frequent the building a lot with a friend who actually has an office space there. One of the things that I liked about that particular building is it's a very quiet building, and it seems to be a lot of business operators or professionals there that don't have a lot of clients coming in and out of the building.
I guess my other concern is the shared conference room. Attorneys do depositions all the time. Deposition usually starts at 9 a.m. in the morning, and it actually can go till 5 in the afternoon. What are you going to do with the family that if that conference room is taken, where are you going to go with the family to make arrangements?
So in most of my experiences when I operate Scales Funeral Home, most of the time I either offered my clients the opportunity to make arrangements at their residence. I rarely use the conference room at the funeral home. The majority of the time I use my office. Since I have an office there, I would probably use my office more so than I use the conference room. Probably use the conference room if I had a large number of people And the conference room is available by scheduling the conference room because it's used by people in the build, on that particular floor. And also, all of the conference rooms in the building would be available if I wanted to use the conference room on that floor at a particular time. Then I would simply call the receptionist and schedule it. And she said, no, it's not available at that time. Then I could actually schedule it on the first floor instead of the third floor that I'm on.
I guess I go back also to what Ms. Stevens says. When families come in, they've lost someone, the last thing they want to be done is shuffled around from floor to floor, room to room, and stuff like that. Most families want to get in and get out. They don't want to be at a funeral home. They are only there because they have arrangements to make. I just have a lot of problems with shared bathrooms in a conference room.
And I think that's probably the beauty of this type of setting. And that was one of the things my friend was telling me about, the setting that she has. And I had some reservations myself, but when she explained to me the type of setting that she had, she too had come from a background of being in a traditional funeral home. And she said a lot of the people were more relaxed because they had a fear of being in a funeral home. And so she provided me with a sense of comfort because it didn't seem like being in a traditional funeral home setting. People were more at ease and more relaxed. And even in instances myself, when I was in business in a traditional funeral home, I had some people that were afraid of coming into a funeral home. So that was one of the reasons why I started going into the residences to make arrangements in the comfort of their home, because some people have a fear of funeral homes. So my primary concern as a funeral director is my clients, because for me, it is about taking care of my clients to make sure that I'm doing whatever I can do to make this less burdensome and cumbersome experience, understanding that they have lost a loved one. And I know even when I lost my mother this past September, working with my own siblings, because they were looking at me, even though my mom was 97, I was her primary caregiver. It was difficult for me because I'm trying to deal with her loss myself, but my family was looking at me, and instead of us dealing with the funeral director that we chose, it was still placed on me. I still wanted to make sure that everything was taken care of properly. And instead of going to the funeral home, we ended up doing everything at my sister's house. And it just reminded me of how I did things at the funeral home, using either the catalog or the computer and making arrangements at the house. I've been, from my training at Gupton, from my training with the founder of Scales Funeral Home, J. Robert Scales, Mrs. Elizabeth Scales, I've always tried to do things in the proper way as I was trained educationally and from Mr. and Mrs. Scales. So that we're able to take care of the clients that we serve in a very professional manner. I've always tried to conduct my services in a manner so that they're handled in a manner with dignity and precision, because all I have is, as a funeral director, is my reputation. And if I do anything that would damage that, then the families are not going to come back, and then I wouldn't be in business.
I have a question on the Music City letter. It's a little confusing to me. Necessary Work LLC, Rodney Edwards, doing business as Music City Mortuary, but the establishment copy has Mr. Murphy as the manager there. So what does Necessary Work, is that two separate companies? I don't-
Necessary Work is the LLC that owns Music City Mortuary.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Nash. I didn't know that.
Mr. Starks,
Yes, sir.
going back to, you've been here as long as
Yes,
we
sir.
have, I think. So, going back to our other previous applicants, on the, I got the 3 letters from Nelson and Sons, Legacy Memorial, and then Music City. So,
Right.
Couple of questions. Is it just going to depend on volume of business at the time as far as where the body is going to go? That's going to be if it's going to be
Right.
embalmed.
What would best serve the client?
And then, are you going to, so if you, I'm assuming most of your service is going to be taking place at churches.
Right. So,
Do you have, and what about, sorry.
So I've just established being in the business so long
Sure.
and being a native Nashvilleian. I just have just multiple friends that are pastors and family members that are pastors that have
Sure.
offered churches to me when I explained to them over about the last year what my intentions were, just kind of getting a feel.
Sure.
Would it be possible to use your church? What would the fee be, if any fee? And they've all just been very supportive, saying they would open their doors to me if it was needed.
What about, so going back to the other previous applicants
Mm-hmm.
and other situations that we've dealt with, in the event of an identification viewing or a private family viewing or something like that, where would those be taking place?
So in the past, if someone called and they specifically requested a cremation when I was in business at scale, and they specifically wanted a direct cremation, most of the time I would make the removal myself, just say it was at ABC Hospital.
Sure.
I would go pick the person up and immediately take them to Music City, drop them off myself, secure all the documentation, have everything prepared for the cremation. Then I would get a phone call later, say, hey, we want to go ahead and view. So-and-so is out of town. They will be here tomorrow evening. I would set it up at Music City for that viewing. They have a room there
Right.
for that to take place. I did not have a letter for them because I didn't know it would be required. But what I did do when they sent me that letter, I did request a copy of their price list because I know that they provide that service, but I wanted to make sure when I was compiling my general price list for the general public that I knew what to charge the general public based on what Music City charged the funeral home. So I do have that. Music City does offer that to all of the funeral homes that they serve. So if any funeral home is bringing someone there to be cremated, that's one of the services they provide. They also provide that room at a charge for the funeral home if someone is being embalmed by them, dressed and casketed, and the family wants to come in and view the body prior to the body going to the church. And they charge a fee for that. But I did not know that a picture of the room was required and a letter from them for that was required. Had I known, I would have provided. But I also do have my good friend and colleague, Mr. Albert Nelson, with me. He also had agreed that I could use his chapel and facility in Murfreesboro if, it was necessary. So he can verbally confirm that if that would help.
Sure.
I am the majority owner.
So I get,
I'm the only owner.
thank you for being here today, Mr. Nelson. So I will applaud you that you, the first person to have on your general price list on page 2, number Q, private view of remains prior to cremation and embalming. So that, I will thank you for having that on there because the first person to have that. But we still, and Mr. Nelson, thank you for being here, but we still, I think that to go with this, we've set a precedent of requiring the photographs.
Okay. I understand.
I think that's something that we're going to have to require. I don't know what everybody else's thoughts are, but I just want to make sure that we are fair and equal with everyone's
Right. Can that be
application.
submitted by email?
Yeah, I think you just could email that to Mr. Gribble.
Okay.
that
I just
correct?
need an email address and I can get that.
Is that correct?
Either this evening or first thing in the morning.
If I was, what I think you would need to do is it, I'm assuming there's a possibility that those things could happen at the other two, Mr. Nelson's establishment or the Legacy Memorial Establishment as well. So I think you probably need photographs from those places too.
Yeah, no problem.
And I think that this iPad's about to wear me out. Sorry, we got to flip through all these things. Can't know which way I'm going here. So, in the letters from the establishments, including Music City, that we probably need to have that on there as well.
Okay, sure.
Just since we have done that with all the other cases, I think that's just what we'll have to.
I have a question on your GPL. It's
Yes.
clarification, and you may not have it in front of you, but P is crematory fee to witness cremation, $350. Then R is witness cremation, $350. Could you tell me the difference in those two line items?
I can tell you.
Okay, good.
When you go into Music City, if one of the family members, if more than three, there's a price for that. But if it's somebody that wants to just come in and see them push the button, it's $350 is what he charges. They just want to come in and see that mama's been cremated.
So,
I don't think I've ever seen that.
I've never heard of it.
Yes, sir. It happens all the time.
I charge for discrimination. That's just.
Do it.
I don't.
You charge for pushing to that.
Not for pushing the button.
I charge.
witnessing them.
We charge for witness cremation.
Do you?
Yeah.
You charge for what now, Mr.
Or
Nash?
a witness cremation. We charge for that.
Okay.
So I mean, I didn't realize my microphone's still on here. I think that unless anybody else, does anybody have anything else before I make a motion?
As long as it's consistent.
Yes.
I think that so I make a motion to table this to the next meeting and not require a re-inspection as long as we have letters from each establishment stating exactly what's going to be taking place there. For Music City being cremation, embalming, and viewing. And then for Legacy and Nelson, that you could be using their facilities for embalming and viewing. And then photographs of those three facilities.
Now, of the photographs, you want a picture of the what? Of the.
I guess the view, if you're going to let him view a body, have somebody view there, wherever that would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Is that consistent with the other ones?
The only question I have, so that we complete understanding, it doesn't come up later. The board's okay with the one office and using the shared conference rooms. That's okay.
I think that it's depending on how busy that building is. If it was, Mr. Starks seems like he's pretty confident of the busyness of the building, and I'm okay. I'm okay with that. And it sounds like he goes to a lot of people's homes to make arrangements. So I don't necessarily have any issues with that. He does have a private office that he has access to all the time. So I don't have an issue with that personally.
yeah, and I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm embarrassed and then they go and tell somebody they went to me and,
It sounds like it's
I don't wanna
going
look
to be
bad.
just some scheduling on your part to
Right.
ensure that
Right.
the family's taken care of. And I feel like you can handle that. But you do have the private office should you have an issue arise there as a way for the
and
family
I
to have
think
privacy.
that's what I would prefer is to do most of them in the office.
One thing where I got the floor, I ain't got much of it, but Mr. Wheeler had mentioned earlier today that you guys sent out emails to all of the establishments.
We don't. The office does.
The office sends out emails to all of the establishments. You hadn't sent us emails about regulatories, about anything that's happening inside. Licenses, the only way that we know that our license needs renewed is look on the wall. we don't get anything about renewal of license. And if you do send it to some of our older, I'm just speaking, I'm with the association. And with the association, we have a lot of older funeral homes that don't even know how to use email. So they don't get the information, and we as an association try to give it to them as much as possible. But even with that, we miss some stuff. But I don't know how you send out. We used to get re-registration letters before COVID. During the 3 years of COVID, we got nothing. We got nothing. After COVID, my son now gets an email about renewing licenses and stuff like that. But most of the older members don't receive anything.
Well,
Is
to
it
address that,
too
I'm one of
much?
the older members. I've been licensed for many years, but I will say this, my license can do, I received something in my mail.
Yes.
And I received an email.
That's respect of person.
Pardon?
That's respect of person. You on the board. So
No, sir, I was not on the board at
All
the
right,
time.
President Lee, we've got a motion on the floor,
That's all right.
and then we'll address this. But I'd like to, I want to say, you come across very professionally.
Thank you.
We have a motion on the floor. But I want to hear.
We have a motion by Mr. Nash, and I'm assuming a second by Mr. Whaler, or do we have a second?
Sure.
Second by Mr. Whaler to table the motion for application until the items prescribed are presented to Mr. Gribble for representment in the May meeting.
Before we vote, I just want to make sure you understand what we need.
Right.
You have any questions for us?
No, you
before we
just
vote
need
on
a
this?
picture of each
the photographs of-
facility I received a letter from. You need a picture of their viewing.
And
area.
then updated letters
letters,
stating
right.
what you're authorized
What
to
they are
do there.
providing. You do not need a picture of their embalming area
No.
because
no,
that's already
right.
Okay.
That was right.
All right, understood.
All in favor of the motion, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank
Mr. Lee, I would like to hear from Mr. Nelson about, are you not receiving any notifications?
We are now. My son receives it through his email, but I don't receive any notifications to say when my license have expired or when they're due. I know when they're due because I exhibit all of the license on the wall.
Right.
That's one of my daily routines is to look at all the license on the wall. So I know, I mean, mine has never expired, but we don't get anything by mail. I don't get anything by mail or by email.
Mr. Albert, talk to Brandon and ask him whose email address he has on your license.
Okay.
Because whoever the email address on your license is where the emails are sent to, and then all the mail is sent to the address that's on the license. So wherever that, I mean, there's no respect of persons. There's no certain people don't get certain things and others doesn't get that. Now, it may go to someone's email and it may go to junk mail because they don't have it to where it will accept the mail.
Right.
But there's a notice that is mailed and typically an email that goes out as well about the renewal of individual license. And then the establishment, as I mentioned this board before, Ms. Bohannon makes sure that each establishment is called at least once if they're coming up toward the end of the month and they haven't renewed their license. So it's, you may not be getting it yourself because it may be that someone else's address or another address or another email address is on it, but it's been sent. It's not.
Okay.
And
I've
emailed back and forth. Brandon knows my email. I mean,
Right, he knows your email.
Yeah,
I'm just talking about my license, that's all.
Yes, sir.
He gets emails all the time, but he's never got an email to say that my license are currently due.
it won't go to him unless he's on your, unless
Well, he is
it
the
goes
one-
to whoever's
He is
on.
the one on my email address. He is the one.
Ms. Bohannon.
Okay.
I would like to just say that 60 days prior to anybody's renewal, establishment, funeral director, or embalmer, there is a renewal reminder that is sent out via mail to every person that's licensed within the state of Tennessee or has an establishment license. Now, emails, they aren't necessarily sent until if there's an issue. So if there's an issue, then we will email you directly. And if there's anybody that feels like they aren't getting this information, please feel free to contact the board, and we'll make sure that we update, your address is updated and your email address is updated.
We'll have him do that. We have Brandon to update it, but we'll check it out. But I know we get nothing paper. I get all the mail. I get all the mail out of Shelbyville office, all the mail out of Murfreesboro office. And so I hadn't got a renewal letter, but I'll look again and make sure that Brandon is receiving everything that I should receive too, because he's usually pretty good with that. Whatever comes in, it's got my name attached to it, whether we owe somebody or anything, it usually comes to me.
And Mr. Nelson, I don't want to throw the post office on the bus either.
Yes, sir.
But, I mean,
Yes, I got you.
I don't personally take that and put it in a mailbox,
Right.
nor I don't personally get out and make sure it's in your mailbox.
Right.
So it could be sent and you still not get it.
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely true.
That's right. Thank you.
Mr. Nelson, I'm old school, and I have somebody else reminding me too.
Yes.
So
yes. that's what I do.
we need to do that.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
That's why I checked with him before I fuss too much.
Okay.
And you know,
Thank you.
when I fuss, I don't fuss long.
I hear you.
Thank you all. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any comments from the public? Mr. Lee, you're the only one left.
Mr. Lee, I've been reminded, and I don't think there's anybody there. I don't think there's anybody there, but I've also been reminded by administration that we should ask if there's anybody on virtually to make a comment as well. I don't think there's anyone still with us, but there were some people earlier today.
Ms. Bohannon, is there anybody on for public comment or anyone on Teams for public comment?
Everybody who said yes, I think they misinterpreted what this meant. They were the people that spoke for each establishment and license.
Is there?
And they're no longer present. And they're no longer present in the room now, correct?
That's correct.
Is there any more business to come before the board?
May I make a motion to adjourn?
Third. All in favor? Aye. Motion carried.
And told Joe.